So hey there, listeners. Welcome back to another Curiosities episode. So this is your first one. This is just where we talk about our most recent paper, but specifically things that maybe aren't directly related to the paper itself, things that we just found interesting and wanted to do a little more research on. So these will be things that relate to our last episode, which is called Your Attention, Please. So if you haven't already checked it out, give it a listen.
I'm Luke.
And I'm Hunter, and you're listening to Epistem, a show where we explore papers in STEM fields and let you know what they're all about.
So I'll let Hunter kick things off here.
Yep, sure thing. Well, this paper in general was very interesting. I like the perception and just neuroscience in general. So this got me thinking about a lot of different ways that perception is utilized, not specifically implied motion like the paper was about, but I do have a lot of cool information about perception in general. Many studies have been done on the perception of one's body and the relationship between perception and physical sensations. One of the interesting studies that we brought up in the episode is the rubber hand illusion, which is an example of body transfer illusion. This involves someone having the thoughts that something is part of their body when it isn't. So I'll go a little bit in depth just explaining that experiment a little bit, and then we'll move on from there. So the study involves someone hiding an arm behind a small wall or other visual block, and then resting a visible fake hand on the table where their real hand would be if they had their hands on the table. The rubber hand and the actual person's hand are brushed lightly, whether it be a paintbrush or some other means, maybe a pencil. They're brushed in the same manner so that the person feels like the rubber hand is their own because it is somewhat getting the same sensations as their own hand. So the experiment goes on for a while in this way, conditioning the brain to perceive the arm as one's own. And then the experimenter will abruptly hit the rubber hand with a hammer. And then this creates the illusion of someone getting hit in the hand with a hammer, and almost everyone that does the experiment flinches and or feels like they got hit with a hammer, which is, I think, very interesting.
Or like pulls their hand back.
Yeah.
And I remember watching a video of it. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, if you want to check it out, there's hundreds of videos on YouTube. Look up the rubber hand experiment and you'll figure it out.
There's also an episode of House, the show House, where a guy has chronic pain in a hand that's missing, and he uses this principle to heal the guy's chronic pain.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool. People have been using or implementing this method in prosthetics, and I think that's a very interesting thing because it's all about, with a lot of prosthetics, the main problem that people have is that it's all about body perception. So if someone can perceive their prosthetic as their own limb, they'll be more fluid with it and actually be able to somewhat feel like they have that hand. Like some people actually talk about how they have sensations within their prosthetic due to them having the same relationship that they did with their actual body parts, which is really cool.
It's a cool application.
I think that this paper's implications of perceived motion perception could possibly be used in the future on the prosthetic limbs, and being able to have someone perceive motion with their limbs as if they were their own, and hopefully help those that are missing limbs or other just body parts in general to feel like they have their own body part again. That was one of the many things that I found interesting about this paper and just perception in general. I'm sure Luke definitely has some more to say about the subject.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that was talked about in the paper was the concept of exaptation, or it's sometimes known as co-option. So this is the idea that a trait can be evolved over the years to serve a particular function, but then evolved to serve a different function. So one example that I think illustrates this pretty well is bird feathers. So there's been a lot of study that's shown that bird feathers were actually evolved for insulation, and using them for flight was kind of a secondary purpose, like a secondary function of feathers. So that's an example of exaptation. So I tried to look into some more examples. A more basic example that I think a lot of people could resonate with is just aesthetic appeal. So I would say in early humans, our brains and our visual system was designed to appraise objects for their utility, like for how their purpose is food or for shelter or something like that. That's kind of what our brain taught us was good and bad. It's just based on its utility. But eventually, that criteria of what's good and bad, instead of being based on utility, it becomes more shaped by social factors, such as the positive effects of making something impressive, like an impressive piece of art, would have a beneficial effect on your life, right, and on your psyche. Or looking physically desirable has a positive effect. So this system of object appraisal started getting used more for more than simple survival means.
Yeah, that's interesting how society will really just form how you perceive your looks or just how you perceive your motions in general.
Right, like literally change what your brain is doing with the neural mechanisms it's already got in place.
Yeah.
So what the paper was getting at in our last episode was that our model of attention in others is an exaptation of our model of movement.
Well, this seems like a good time to take a break, so let's do it. Well, getting back into it, one of the other things that I've always found very interesting that sort of related with, is related with perception, not specifically related to the paper, but the perception of oneself through psychosomatic injuries. A psychosomatic injury is an injury that occurs, but the brain perceives it to be worse than it is, such as someone, a good example would be if someone gets in a car crash and their legs were pinned down while they were in a car crash, after the event, they still might feel that they have no sensation in their legs due to them being pinned down in a very traumatic moment. So a lot of people will go to either therapy, meditation, or other means to help them get over these injuries, whereas I think that more research into the field of neuroscience and perception in general can really help these people figure out how to overcome those injuries and really just get a better perception of what they're feeling and not be stuck behind with those traumatic injuries.
Right. Yet another good example of a reason that research into these fields, into these sciences, is worthwhile.
Yeah, I was thinking that this paper itself might be able to help with that, in that people will see perceived motion within an injury spot. Say someone has a psychosomatic injury in their leg, they would see they could use perceived motion and the subconscious to actually motivate that leg to move where it wants to go, because it's in your psyche and in your subconscious state of mind that you want to move your legs or you want to move your arms, whatever the injury may be.
Yeah.
One thing that can really be related, and I think I've related it in past episodes, to almost any field, specifically the neuroscience field, is nurture versus nature. There are many theories as to which is actually more important and more crucial to the learning process. The theories and arguments would go one way or another. There's no true definitive answer at the moment. But applied motion perception is seemingly tied to nature due to our primitive needs to follow motion and be alert to see any incoming predators or prey that are running by and be able to see any changes that are occurring within our environment, which I think is very important. Arvid told us that he plans to do studies with children in the future to try to get a more definitive answer as to if perceived motion perception is nurture or nature biased. There are arguments both ways, as I was saying. I personally believe that there's a good healthy mix of nature and nurture that make up the human perception process. I would say most social interactions would probably be more nurture due to people picking up traits from those who have raised them. This can lead to good and bad traits, such as the drive to work hard or having hegemonistic views. As I stated earlier, many believe other perceptions are derived from nature, from years of evolution, and as I believe I've said in past episodes and truly believe in everything, is that evolution is one of the greatest learning processes we have access to. We just need to find the right way to tap into its potential.
Right. So with nature and nurture, that actually is a nice transition for the idea of theory of mind. Again, one of the things that the lab that Arvid and the researchers who wrote the last paper worked with studied the attention schema theory and the theory of mind. So just to go into what theory of mind is, It's the idea that you can attribute beliefs, feelings, moods, emotions, those kinds of things to yourself and to people, despite them not being directly perceivable. So like I can look at you and I can guess how you're feeling right now, or I can understand the idea that you may have an opinion about something that's different than mine and that they're unique things attributed to us as individuals. So this theory of mind is developed at an early stage in life. Typically you'll see it develop the most by 5 years old or so. So it's really important for young people, and that's why the results of an experiment on children might be really interesting, especially in terms of things like social disorders or autism or schizophrenia, because they can be thought of as conditions of one's theory of mind. One of the ways that theory of mind can be tested is with what's called a false belief task. So this is where a child realizes that they know something that you don't, or that they have information that somebody else doesn't have. For example, you could show them a box of candy and then dump it out, but it's actually full of coins. That would be against expectations, right? That they probably wouldn't be expecting that. But then you could ask them, if you did the same thing to another child, if they think the child would expect coins to come out or not. If they would say candy, then they would realize that other people who did not have, other kids specifically, who did not have access to that information that they had, wouldn't have any reason to expect that there's coins in the candy box. So basically what this means is that they understand that people who don't have the same information as them may not hold the same opinions or beliefs as them. And this is, again, something that you would see developed in somebody by the time they're about 5.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because they have they're basing their perception more or less on insider info rather than what they're accustomed to believe in.
Exactly. It's less direct.
Yeah.
There's more nuanced cognition going on in theory of mind. Yeah. Well, if there's anything that you guys think might be interesting to look into further, be sure to let us know. We're always looking for new interesting papers to read.
We like to take your input as our listener base, and if you do have anything specific that you want us to look into, let us know, and we'll start looking into that, and we'd gladly take on a new project. As always, our email is open for any kind of questions, comments, or concerns. Our email is epistem.pod@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's epi.stem. And if you really enjoyed the show, hit us up on Patreon at patreon.com/epistem.